She said she was touched. I asked, where? She said, her toes. I said, no way. She said, yes way. I said, it was probably your comforter. She said, no, those were fingers. I felt fingers on my toes. Someone touched me. Hi, I'm Meredith. This is Rattled and Shook, and I'm going to tell you a true creepy story. This one was sent in by Steph. So this story is sort of a trust me bro because I have no evidence other than the countless paranormal experiences other people have also had at Gettysburg. There's a reason it's considered one of the top haunted places in all of the United States. And I can tell you, if you go in blind with absolutely zero experience like I did, you are asking for trouble. I've always been a big history buff and an even bigger fan of the spooky. So basically, Gettysburg was a dream location. Historic battlefield where thousands of men died tragically and horrifically and is said to be extremely haunted. Sign me up yesterday. I was only 16 at the time, but luckily for me, my dad is perhaps a bigger history buff than I am, so he was more than willing to make the 10-plus hour drive from Tennessee to Pennsylvania. I also convinced my friend, who was also 16, to come along with us. My dad booked us rooms in a historic bed and breakfast right outside of the town. He had his room and we had ours. We did the typical tourist stuff, went to the battlefield, went into town to shop. The battlefield alone took about 3 full days to explore because it's so large. At night, we went on a few different ghost tours with various local travel groups. They were a cool way to explore some of the more haunted buildings that you really couldn't see much of during the day because they weren't public. For example, we went into the basement of the Farnsworth house. That was used as a makeshift field hospital during the Civil War and is reported to be extremely haunted. We went for a ghost story hour. They don't let people into the basement during the working day. We also took long walking tours, one in particular, where we smelled an overwhelming smell of peppermint right up our noses while my friend and I were standing away from people and the guide. We thought it might have been like a waft coming off of someone chewing gum or eating a mint, but later the tour guide mentioned that women used handkerchiefs doused in peppermint oil to block out the smell of rotting bodies. So that was neat. One particular tour took us to an offshoot of the battlefield. It was a large wooded area behind what I seem to remember as like a church. The church parking lot was on a slight hill and it dipped down to a small field and then a patch of dark woods. I'd still remember it today if I saw it. I remember the tour guide saying it was part of the battlefield, just not a marked area, but realistically, like everywhere in that town was basically a battlefield. He took us all to the edge of the field, but didn't want us getting too close to the woods, so we stayed in the grass on the hill overlooking this large wooded area. I swear we heard gunshots coming from the woods, which may be par for the course at Gettysburg. And some people were getting strange orbs on their cameras. This was 21 years ago, so if you had a digital camera, you were fancy. Because of the amount of people on the tour, it really didn't have a spooky vibe, honestly. Even though the tour guide claimed it was indeed very spooky. Other than being pitch black in the woods, nothing really seemed off. The last night in Gettysburg came, and after dinner, my friend and I convinced my dad to go back to that wooded area off of the church. It was close by, and since we didn't see anything the night before, we really wanted to try again. My dad drove us there, and we parked. My friend and I got out of the car with our disposable flash cameras ready to capture some ghost evidence. Mind you, we were both 16. We have zero paranormal investigative experience and are just fueled by the sheer audacity of youth. We started heading toward the woods, determined to get close enough this time to get real evidence. As we walked up to the woods, an absolutely overwhelming sensation of dread just sank in. My friend actually stopped a ways back and refused to get any closer. I, however, marched on towards the woods. I started taking pictures and decided to talk to the ghosts, if there were any. That was my first mistake. While I firmly believe in treating paranormal encounters with respect, looking at you, Zach Baggins, I think there's a point where you can be too friendly and invite them in. I got to the very edge of the woods and said, "We came all the way from Tennessee to see you. Show yourself." The way I could actually feel the air change was wild. It was a palpable pressure that shifted, and I swear I started to see things shift and move in the trees. I even felt like I heard a whisper. My friend started to see and hear things also, and she retreated further from the woods. I remember crouching down to try and see something in the trees, and that's when a full-body Confederate soldier manifested out of what I can only describe as steam right between some trees. I remember he had glasses and seemed to be bulky with supplies, and I know exactly how crazy this sounds. I'm fully aware this is wild. I was staring right at him when my dad turned on the car lights and he vanished. Thanks a lot, Dad. My friend and I made our way back to the car quickly. We were both pretty freaked out. She told me she also thought she saw someone in the woods, but she couldn't describe him like I could. Now comes the wildest part. The part where we were followed home. If you know anything about the paranormal, you know they can follow you home if you leave a door open. And in Gettysburg, that apparently happens a lot to people, especially inexperienced people. We 100% left that door open. While driving back, I thought I saw something in the car while looking through the passenger side window, but it was gone as soon as we went under a streetlight. I thought, it's just my imagination. We get to the room, and my friend and I can both just feel how off things are. The room felt heavy and odd. We decided we just scared ourselves ghost hunting, and our imaginations were going crazy. As soon as I got to the bathroom to get ready, my friend opened the door and said, "Hurry up, I don't want to be alone in here." I told her to just come in with me and we'll brush our teeth together, because honestly, I didn't want to be alone either. Our room didn't even have like a TV, so when I say we were alone in there, we were really alone. We talked for a while, but decided ultimately just to go to bed because we weren't going to shake these nerves tonight, especially because we spent most of our time trying to rationalize what we'd seen in the woods. And we decided to be brave and turn off the lamps on the nightstand. There was one outside light coming from the windows anyway, so we thought we'd be okay with just that. It hadn't been 1 minute when my friend jerked up and frantically turned on the lamp. I immediately shot up too, asking what had happened. She said she was touched. I asked, where? She said, her toes. I said, no way. She said, yes way. I said, it was probably your comforter. She said, no, those were fingers. I felt fingers on my toes. Someone touched me. Well, it definitely wasn't me. I was in a whole different bed. We looked at each other and mutually had the look of, what the fuck do we do now? She suggested something might have followed us home. I said, that's impossible. How very wrong I was. My friend was shaken, and it took me a while to calm her down. But eventually, I convinced her it was probably just her sheets and her imagination. We both laid back down and turned off the lamps. It wasn't 30 seconds later that I felt what I can only describe as cold static in the shape of a hand grabbing my ass. Now, at this point in my life, I'm 16, hadn't even kissed a boy, so to have something grab my butt was particularly horrifying. I immediately sat up and was thinking, no fucking way. I wear glasses at night. I have my contacts on during the day, but at night, I wear glasses so I can take them off and sleep. As I put my glasses on my face and looked straight ahead, I saw plain as day 2 Confederate soldiers on the far side of the room. They were illuminated by the slight moonlight coming from one of the far windows. One was sitting, one was standing. The standing one had this grin on his face. He had curly blonde hair, and he couldn't have been a day over 16. I'm not sure if I saw them more physically or more in my mind's eye, but I definitely saw them. I turned on the lamp and my friend immediately said, "What? Oh my God, what?" I told her what happened and it put her into a spiral. She started saying she knew something followed us because she thought she saw someone in the rear view mirror on the way back. She kept saying she thought it was a trick of the light or her imagination, but she said she saw someone that looked a lot like a Confederate soldier. My friend was on the verge of a panic attack. She had no experience with the paranormal, and I was clearly in over my head. No amount of ghost hunting shows could have prepared me for this. I can't really describe what came over me. Maybe it was me instinctively trying to calm my friend down, or maybe it was the universe telling me exactly what I needed to do. But I stood up and demanded that whatever was in the room with us leave. They weren't welcome there, and they didn't have permission to touch us. I remember feeling this aura sort of leave my body and expand through the room. As I've gotten older, I realized I basically put out what they call a psychic shield. It basically is a way of slamming the door to the paranormal shut and deadbolting it. Of course, at the time, I had no idea I'd done this. I just remember visualizing a bubble going around me and my friend, a bubble of protection, if you will. After I did that, the vibe in the room immediately shifted and it did feel lighter. It was clear to us that we had brought something back, and now I think we had gotten it to leave. Hopefully. Needless to say, we slept with the lights on that night. I genuinely think that those soldiers would have tried to follow us back to Tennessee. Maybe they were from Tennessee or nearby, and after I mentioned we were from Tennessee, they saw us as a way home. Which is kind of sad if you think about it. I mean, they were like kids. I'm 37 years old now, and I still think about that night and those soldiers regularly. I plan to go back one day and try to find that spot again, walk to the woods, and ask if anyone remembers following a 16-year-old girl back to her room and grabbing her butt. Then after a firm talk about consent, maybe I'll offer him a way home without the scare tactics.